something a friend or family member said did that made you think I'm embarrassed that I even know you? Story 1. Out to eat with my parents and boyfriend. Dad is one of the worst people to go out to eat with because of the way he treats staff. As waitress was telling us the specials, my dad turned to my boyfriend and yelled "Yes," she mumbling. Dad is by no means hard of hearing. Boyfriend since became husband, and he yells that to me at least once a week. We've been married 28 years. Story 2. I have an uncle that's loud, willfully ignorant, and has used temper tantrums and unpleasant behavior to get his way his whole life. He's like the villain in a bad teen novel. The last straw for me was when my grandparents passed away. He tried to steal everything from his siblings. When my mother stood up to him, he threatened to kill her. I'd really like to believe there was a mix-up at the hospital when he was born and that we aren't really related. Story 3. We came across one of my friends in a wheelchair. I use one as well. While I was out on a walk with my grandma, parents and sister, we chatted for a bit when suddenly my grandma, who was silent till now, chimed in with "Ugh, the nerve some people have, pretending to be ill just to use a wheelchair, get a hobby," targeted at my friend. Then she tried to push me so we could go away. My friend was in a hit-and-run accident a month or two prior which left them paralyzed from the waist down. I never spoke to that woman ever again. Story 4. 12-year-old cousin jerked off in the back seat of a van that was filled with carpool kids in the neighborhood. He was kicked out of the carpool, and I had to join him since he's family. Story 5. My overweight grandma looking at an overweight lady who'd just gotten her food in a restaurant, and loudly staring, "Would you look at that? She just keeps eating." Story 6. Found out my alcoholic brother had been begging all women that I know from high school for. Found out when they all exposed him on Facebook, screenshots and all. Story 7. My dad does a really bad Irish accent, and he does it in public on occasion, and I always picture a sinkhole opening up underneath me and dropping me straight into, and I'm always disappointed when it doesn't happen. Story 8. When I went for sushi with some coworkers and the one dude I convinced to come because I thought he was cool just asked for french fries and sat there and pouted because he didn't want to eat all this gay Jap food. Quote, "Why the did he come then? Never been so disappointed in someone. Dinner with coworkers is always risky." Made the entire thing awkward as. Story 9. My dad had a super deep growly voice, barely a subsonic rumble. To make it worse, he had his own unique way of naming foods that other people didn't understand. For instance, he would ask for slop and rocks instead of biscuits and gravy. We were at freaking Applebee's because my mom loved it. Our waiter was just a sweet young guy. He asked for drink orders. "Beefeater rocks." My dad rumbles. "Pardon," said the waiter. "Beefeater rocks." Dad says louder. Our poor waiter looked scared. He couldn't figure out what my dad was saying, and Dad was looking angrier by the second. How many Applebee's customers order a gin on the rocks like they're in some 1940s film noir? "Beefeater rocks," Dad yelled for the third time, until someone had mercy on the lad and translated what my dad wanted for him. Story 10. I was a bridesmaid at my cousin's wedding. Quick context, we're one of those cultures that has multiple ceremonies for a wedding, and this story is about the reception and a later event known as the homecoming. My cousin and her groom were doing the rounds at the reception and greeting all their guests when it was announced that food would be served soon. A few minutes later, my cousin comes back to our table in tears and says that after the announcement they were encouraged to speed things along so food could be served and didn't get to spend a lot of time with every table, so a couple of the elder relatives came up to her and insulted her, saying, "How dare you not talk to us? Are we not good enough for you?" My cousin refused to tell us who said it. A couple days later was the homecoming, which went on pretty long even for a homecoming. I was dancing with a bunch of the groom's family members, aunties, uncles, cousins, etc., however was getting pretty exhausted. Was also wearing chunky heels, so I finally decided to take a break from all the dancing, apologized to the people I was dancing with, and went off to have a seat. A few minutes later I'm standing with my other bridesmaid cousin and our two male cousins when a clearly tipsy uncle, whom I later learnt was the groom's father's brother, comes up to us and starts yelling. He grabs my bridesmaid cousin's wrist and attempts to grab mine too, but I pull my arm out from him. He tries again, I do the same thing. He tries a third time and I pull so hard he ends up flicking himself in the nose, and then I put my male cousin between me and him. He then screams, "What good are you bridesmaids if you're not even going to dance? Why even come, you are useless," and so on and so forth, even spitting in my cousin's faces. We stand there mostly in shock until his wife comes and pulls him away. We later informed the bride and groom of this, and the groom apologized and mentioned that that was the same uncle who'd insulted them at the reception. I'd never dealt with anything like that before, and it was pretty disgusting. Story 11. My uncle went to a McDonald's drive-thru for a coffee. As he was in the lineup he saw my aunt, who is a real piece of, stealing bricks from the patio area. Who does that? Edit. This was not even the worst thing she has done. She is a vile person who should be in a mental institution. Story 12. My mom and I were debating racism, and I told her that she's racist. Her response: "I'm not racist. I just think all black people should go back to Africa." Story 13. At a family dinner in front of my old white racist dickhead father says, "So those black people have really started to climb out of the gutter lately, huh?" Story 14. Roommate walked into the room and told me my food looked good. I didn't have any food. It was his food that he had been eating before he left the room for less than 10 minutes. I told him that, and he didn't believe me. Story 15. My high school girlfriend and I went to a World War II museum on a day with two of the US soldiers who fought in the Air Force on site to answer any questions. My girlfriend was a stereotypical ditzy girl who cared not one bit for education of any kind and was solely focused on trying to start a career in beauty or modeling. Fair enough, school isn't for everyone, but you should at least have some kind of basic education to draw from and fall back on. When we approached the museum, the two soldiers greeted us and asked if we had any questions. Girlfriend: hi, what war did you fight in? The two were confused. Ma'am, this is a World War II museum. We fought in World War II. Girlfriend: did you win? They looked very confused and kind of upset. Of course we won. Girlfriend: what side did you fight on? Like who won? At that point I grabbed her and apologized and started asking questions related to our class project, which was why we went in the first place. From that point on, I tutored her in history, English, and biology until we went our separate ways the next year. Story 16. My dad hates Uberlift drivers. And while driving with him he refers to all of them he sees on the road as either Babu or Ahmed. Then when he sees me wince in discomfort over the remarks, he asks me if that's racist and plays coy, asking me to explain what's racist about it. He's like an edgy 10-year-old troll except several decades out of date. Story 17. My best friend's mom is called the town's racist. That says a lot for a mostly white town in middle of nowhere Indiana. She has been fired from 2 jobs because of HR complaints around discrimination and will tell anyone about it. When our town school board had a meeting, all parents were welcome to attend virtually, but only people speaking before the board could be in person. COVID. You could either have 5 or 10 minutes at the stand. My whole family gasped when we saw her on TV and take the stand. She went on a tirade about CRT. This meeting was about how to deal with COVID and the coming school year, not CRT, and mostly about our schools teaching students that being white is bad. She then implied we needed to separate white Christians from everyone else because they were being persecuted. They had been trying to remove her from the stand at this point, and turned off the mic so no one could hear. I called my friend immediately. She said I know before I got a word out. Her mom pulled stunts like this constantly. Want to know the best part? Her kids don't even attend our schools. They drive 45 minutes to private school every day, and always have. She had no idea what was going on in our schools. Story 18. Man. To my dad: so has your daughter had any children yet? My dad: no, but by the sounds of these two, gestures toward my girlfriend and I've got to worry more about them. This was my dad, talking to the funeral director, while we were picking my mother's ashes. Story 19. One Thanksgiving at the dinner table. My older brother, who had a little too much to drink, recited the notorious "There was an old man from Nantucket Limerick." Stony silence prevailed after he finished. No one knew what to say. Story 20. I met this British girl who lived across the hall in my dorm when I studied abroad in Japan. She was super homesick and had never traveled alone before, and she had never been to Asia. She would sob really loudly every night because she felt so miserable. Anyway, we went to the market during the first week or so, and she had a full toddler tantrum in the market because of the money difference and the Japanese foods that she wasn't used to. It was horribly embarrassing. I just walked away because I didn't want anyone to associate me with her. I started avoiding her after that, but I felt really bad about it. So I eventually had a chat with her and explained how I wanted to still be friends with her, but that her attitude made her hard to be around. After that conversation, she worked very hard to be positive and not whiny or tantrumy around me. I really respected that happy ending. Story 21. My aunt once complained that Subway was too confusing for her. I was sitting there like, you literally pick the ingredients you want in a sandwich and ask them to make it for you. It's not rocket science. Story 22. My family was visiting my mother for the first time. My husband is Hispanic, and my mother asked him if he liked fish sticks for dinner because she didn't have any beans or tortillas. I wanted to die, or I wanted her to die at that moment. Story 23. Long story short, new store policy. My grandma couldn't use a store credit card BC. She wasn't a secondary on the account my grandpa opened. We didn't have another way to pay, so we left just for my grandpa to drive back up there to demand a manager. Mid-40s black man in a suit and tie, who wasn't the manager we spoke to earlier that day, so he got very confused. My grandpa is a very old white man raised by very conservative parents and ended up becoming a pastor. He's very opinionated about everything. Even asked, so are you a lesbo now or what, when I was 14, and cut off all my hair to donate it. So after the manager apologized, offered to add my grandmother to the account as a secondary, and repeated the store policy line and said the manager who he dealt with was new, my grandfather got all but hurt when he realized the lady manager from that day wasn't getting fired and called the store manager some racial slurs. I have a sister and a good portions of aunts and uncles who are people of color. I told him if he wants to be a racist POS to keep it to himself. BC, if I caught him slipping up I would make sure the church knew. He shut up after that and didn't speak to me until we left the store 2 hours later. Story 24. I brought a girl I was seeing in high school to a family event. She's part Indonesian and looks Asian, but her white family has been in America so long she has Civil War veterans in her family tree. My cousin's mom proceeds to talk to her very loud and very slow, and then reverts to normal when talking to me. Saw her do it to multiple Asian servers later. Anyway, my cousin's mom stopped talking to me when I worked for the Obama campaign and now is full on QAnon. Story 25. During my freshman orientation, my mom constantly drilled into my head to make a good first impression, then walked up to literally every person she saw and made a terrible first impression. The whole day, I was just internally screaming to STFU and listen to your own advice. Story 26. Every animal has a weakness. I truly believe I could take down a Siberian tiger if I found their weakness. Put me in a cage with one. I bet I could stab their eyes and take them down. Story 27. I had a family member argue that climate change isn't real. Okay, doesn't sound that abnormal, but she was arguing with my brother. My brother holds degrees in meteorology and oceanography. Story 28. Every time I'm in public with my father and his wife, I would never wish them on any waitstaff or customer service. The moment I think of the most was when I was in my favorite mall store and wanted a t-shirt down from high on the wall. I went for the extended hook, but my dad said something along the lines of, "Let them do it. They're getting paid minimum wage, let them do their job." Right in front of the clerk. I was so embarrassed. Story 29. One time, we were visiting some family who had friends over, and my dad just wouldn't shut up. He was telling the Mexican friend things like, "You're one of the good ones." Talk something about how Mexico was full of gangs and people who kidnap murder children, and some other. My siblings and I were appalled and tried to get him to stop talking, but he wouldn't shut up. After we informed my mom of what happened, she wasn't there, and she talked to him about the seriousness and idiocy of what he said. He decided to apologize to those folks. But why should he care what his grown children tell him, right? We don't know what we're talking about, we're still just children, and children shouldn't tell a parent what to do. Story 30. My grandpa was in the Vietnam War. Pretty obvious that he probably doesn't like Vietnamese. Couldn't take him anywhere without him throwing a slur out into the world when he'd see any Asian person. Edit. My sister had her high school prom and her date was an Asian guy. Nothing wrong with it, but old grandpa sure thought otherwise. All he could do was laugh, and he wouldn't stop laughing because of utter shock. It was one of the cringiest things I've probably ever experienced because everyone knew except my sister's date. Like, I can't explain it, but it was embarrassing. Story 31. My sister was in high school, and we were talking about how where you were born is your nationality. If you were born in America, you're American. So she said, so if I was born in China, I'd be Hispanic. Story 32. Well, some parents just speak too much. My dad had a bit to drink, then he revealed that I searched up BBS on Safari. He went on to tell my uncle, whom told me about my dad telling him. Then they both went around telling everyone. I was about 8, possibly nearing 9 to 10. This was also at my cousin's wedding. It also housed all of my family. Story 33. I forget the exact movie, but there was a torture scene. It was brutal and meant to show how far the bad people were willing to go. Anyway, a main character was being tortured and my buddy bursts out laughing loudly in an otherwise silent audience. I leaned forward to look at him and saw that the entire theater was looking at him disgusted. Story 34. My cousin was caught scamming the IRS with dead kids' social security numbers, and he had been doing this for years. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and even after his release, has tens of thousands of dollars worth of fines to pay. He will be broke for the rest of his life, and rightfully so. And this is just one of the many illegal, immoral, and disgusting things he's done in his life. He's the only person related to me via bloodline I genuinely hate. Story 35. Well, what a post to get in my feed. This one happened today. Things like this have happened before though. My mom was trying to use an Arby's coupon today at McDonald's, which they let you do, but when they wouldn't use it the way she thought it would work, she started complaining, and not full on arguing, but debating the manager through the drive-thru window, even going as far as throwing a worker under the bus by name who had let her use it the way she thought it would work a couple of months ago. She eventually started trying to plead on the fact that she has 8 kids, technically true, but 3 are moved out and her husband is in the hospital, also true, but completely unrelated. I couldn't handle it after that and got out of the car and walked home. This was all because she had to pay 2 instead of 1 for shake. She also got mad a couple of weeks ago when Long John Silver's wouldn't accept coupons that expired in 2003. She pretended not to know that the coupons were expired even when she did. This was the second time she had done that. Story 36. I have an aunt who's a huge Trump supporter and has severe mental illness. She also lusts after every man she sees. At one point she actually tried selling off her stuff to move to Sweden, where she was to marry some guy she met online. It was a photo from an online brochure who was a doctor lawyer and owned a horse farm and had a 6-figure income and just about every notch on the Klitsch romance novel belt. I try to message her and she'll repeatedly call me rather than text because she's convinced her phone is bugged. She also takes a dieting supplement called Adipex, which makes her mental problems much worse. She's also very nosy. Story 37. My dad arguing that slavery was justified. My mom sighing and saying something like, that's just the culture we live in. Every time my brother and I bring up racism, can't convince her that racism is a real thing and wrong and a problem in society. Story 38. Someone who I won't disclose told me that their brother hurt his knee at a BLM protest. I was a little confused, as the brother doesn't at all seem like the type of person who would go to a BLM protest, but I thought maybe he had a problem with cops and found some common ground. So in bewilderment I said, "Oh really?" And they followed it up with, "Yeah, he went to take a knee but the black guy moved his neck." They then insisted that the right person would find that funny, and when I asked who's the right person, other racists, they accused me of being offended. I assured them I wasn't offended, just embarrassed. Story 39. My dad feels the need every time we enter a guitar center. He feels the need that as a good drummer and a narcissist to absolutely kill it on a random drum set, saying, quote, "Hey, I know how to use one of these and I'm just testing it out." Which is fine, except that he doesn't seem to give about how hard he goes and who he inconveniences, like he breaks sticks all the time so much it cuts into his money more than his smoking, which he smokes at least a pack or half of one a day. I still don't know how my mom kept going back to him. Story 40. My brother loudly, in a bar while we were celebrating a friend's achievement, says gay marriage is wrong because it makes a mockery of and diminishes his own marriage. 1. The friend is gay. Most of us knew that. 2. the bar was very LGBT friendly, and this was out of line anywhere but especially here. 3. My brother is divorced and on marriage too, not that I have anything against divorce, but son, check the log in your own eye. Story 41. My ex-boyfriend said that the sun and moon are government projections and he was extremely upset when I told him that he's crazy. He said I was ignorant. Pretty wild conclusions. Story 42. Have an aunt that I'm embarrassed to share blood with dad's sister. She's an LVN and last year she faked being deployed to Afghanistan to help with the COVID relief. Shed post pics on Facebook. She's addicted to social media and Photoshop from other old news articles claiming she was in them and would brag to the whole family that she got to go on missions because she was the only one skinny enough to fit in a helicopter. She was gone on this alleged deployment for 2 weeks before coming back, but turns out she was somewhere at a hotel cheating on her husband again. She went to Mexico with a cousin of mine to get gastric bypass, no judgment there, but denies she got surgery and claims it just her amazing willpower that caused her weight loss. She wasn't overweight to begin with. The cousin she went with was open about it, and we were all concerned because she got really sick from it for a while. She was hospitalized for it, and even when she got out, she denied getting it, which we couldn't care less, but it was still pretty bizarre. She's also faked cancer multiple times, being suicidal, and is currently harassing a now ex-wife of a man both were family friends she was caught cheating on with and sending her multiple threats on different burner phones claiming to be different brothers and sisters of my dad to make her feel unwelcome and ganged up on. Turns out, my aunt just didn't want her near our family because she's concerned about what all she knows and if she'll tell us. Story 43. A family member would store food in her purse, pasta and frozen meals, and would eat them throughout the day. In high school people would come up to me telling me all the things they saw her eat from her purse. It was pretty embarrassing to say the least. Story 44. My dad talking to me about him believing that the reason they're adding LGBTQ characters into cartoons he mostly named Adult Swim ones is because they're trying to convert children into being gay and becoming an abomination of God. Story 45. My little brother did a show on Evil Lives Here about my older murderer brother and my actress was fat. I didn't even know about the show until I saw previews. I am underweight and was very underweight then. Story 46. I attended a meeting in our local community hall put on by a solar panel company. Basically they would install solar panels on people's homes and the electricity savings would basically pay for the panels. It seemed like a pretty good and fair plan. They had an engineer there to speak about some of the details like amount of savings, what was required for install, etc. I don't remember his nationality, but he had obviously been born in another country and had a bit of an accent. Of the 50 or so people in attendance, everyone was polite and asked intelligent questions, except for one guy. Earlier he had talked to me and asked if I was interested, and we had a bit of a conversation, seemed friendly enough. That didn't last. Once the engineer started talking, this idiot started complaining that he couldn't understand past the accent, wondered aloud how this brown guy got the job because he obviously wasn't qualified, and just generally said the kind of things I would say. I was so embarrassed that I had talked to him before. I wanted the earth to swallow me, and I thought the engineer might mistakenly have thought I knew the guy or thought the same as him. Story 47. Last year Boomer Grandpa said if George Floyd could talk to Chauvin, then he could breathe just fine. 70 of black people have inferior culture and sit around on welfare having babies only to collect the money from having a new kid cause they are greedy. I still think about it a ton and haven't forgiven him. Grew up thinking he was my mentor for 25 years. Never saw that coming. Story 48. Teenage daughter of a cousin was caught letting one of her cousins go down on her. He was 10. That whole side of the family is a total embarrassment of humanity. Story 49. My wife's cousin freshman in college wore a free Alex Jones shirt to Christmas dinner in 2019. His uncle asked who Alex Jones is, and he answered, just a misunderstood genius. I went on a rant about Jones spreading false information about the Sandy Hook victims and how it led to harassment of their families, and the uncle smacked him upside the head and told him to go change. Later an aunt asked him if he had a girlfriend yet at college, and my wife chimed in not if he keeps wearing shirts like earlier he won't. Story 50. My mom is anti-vax. She once said to me we shouldn't vaccinate children. Instead, we should expose them to a small amount of dead virus so they can build up an immunity. Story 51. My grandfather, who for most of my life I saw as a very wise man, now no longer says goodbye when we leave his house after we come to visit, but rather, let's go Brandon. Story 52. Well, like 2 weeks ago I was talking with my mother, and apparently my brother saw fit to not get his own son a vaccine shot for COVID, who now has COVID and is in rough shape. Our entire family been pestering him with why, just why, and the only answers we get are you don't hear the things I do. It took me saying to him no, we may not hear the things you do, but we see the same things you do. We see that your son is pretty sick. He's been so embarrassed of himself he's been making it a point to tell people to simply not talk about it, not bring it up, etc. So I had to ask him what happens if your son brings it up. Story 53. This year November 1st week me, my brother and 2 of my cousins went on a trip. We were at a Buddhist temple and a prayer song probably was playing in the speakers as there was no knee in the temple at the time. My cousin decided to mock it by his terrible impression of kung fu moves. And keep in mind this is the one incident that's on the top of my head. He's like 10 years older than me but he's a total and an idiot who thinks that he knows everything and others are stupid. He is pretty arrogant and always misbehaves with us and doesn't know where to draw the line when joking, but if I say something suddenly he's Mr. Hothead. I'm embarrassed that his mom is my aunt. That's how big of a he is. Story 54 too many to mention, but I guess the best would be watching my heroin addict brother get up to leave the room and fall asleep in mid-stride. Runner-up is my mother mocking something I said at 5 years old in the midst of an argument, complete with childish voice. She's 56. Story 55 we were out having a family lunch at a local restaurant. I was talking to one of my female classmates, we were about 15 years old, who happened to work at the restaurant. My grandfather came up and said to my friend, "You're pretty easy on the eyes," with a leer on his face. I wanted the ground to swallow me, and I will never forget the look on my classmate's face. Story 56 my son was a toddler at one point, so anytime I was carrying him out of a store or restaurant while he was screaming and yelling and throwing a tantrum counted. I missed hella dinners and some much-needed shopping trips, still salty, but it gets easier and it gets better. Son was a pretty cool shopping buddy by the time he was about 5 years old. Story 57 we were at a Mexican restaurant, and our server was named Jesus. Every time something happened that my brother liked, he'd say praise Jesus, really loud, e.g., praise Jesus these are good tacos, praise Jesus the pico de gallo is really fresh today. I nearly slapped him. Story 58 I was going to tell you about my sister and what she did to 2 husbands, and a small-town rescue department, but it turned out too long a story. I have never seen people go after money gold digger, except in movies. She took $4 million. Anyway, I am embarrassed to know her. Story 59 I was checking out with my mom at TJ Maxx and the girl at the register asked my mom if she wanted to get a TJ Maxx rewards credit card. My mom said no, and the woman asked again with some extra details about how much it would save us on the purchase that day, and my mom just snapped and went, "Excuse me, but I know what's best for my family," and handed the girl her normal debit card. It wasn't the most insane thing in the world, but was just so disrespectful, unnecessary, and condescending. It was the holiday season and that girl was definitely getting pushed by her manager to get more people to sign up for the company credit card, and my mom treated her so unkindly. All I could do was turn to my mom and ask her what she was doing and then apologize to the girl at the register. My mom is usually very kind and understanding and has worked retail for a chunk of her life and taught my siblings and I to always respect staff and treat them like the human beings they are, and then she did a total 180 and yelled at this poor girl for doing her job. Story 60 my grandmother, recent widow and cancer and COVID survivor. Yes. All recent wasn't feeling good on Thanksgiving Day because she has gotten her booster the day before. My dad said he wasn't vaccinated because it didn't make sense, but then quickly clarified that it obviously made sense for my grandmother. Tell me you're ashamed of being a Fox News robot without telling me. Story 61 uncle went on a racist tirade about how much he hated Mexicans. A week later, we found out that rant was at least partially motivated by the news that his daughter was going to give birth to his half-Mexican grandchild. Story 62 my grandpa once said not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims. That was a yikes. On a much lighter note, he was also complaining about games being more violent these days, and when I tried to tell him about Minecraft admittedly poorly, he said, "Oh, so you just spend all your time killing zombies then?" Story 63 a friend of mine asked where is the abdomen. During training, my friend was a 7th grader, and had good grades of course, no one ever allowed her to forget that moment. Edit looking throw other comments. I would like to say that I am thankful this is the most embarrassed a friend ever made me feel for being their friend. Story 64 my ex-friend who is brown refuses to believe Indians are from Asia, like legit. My other friend and I showed her proof but she doesn't believe it. Her explanation, but brown people are called brown only in the US so they're technically not Asians. Safe to say she's an ex-friend now. Story 65 my uncle was in recovery, met a girl in a halfway house and got her pregnant. They had a baby in May and relapsed and I had no idea. They were driving high without the baby even in a car seat, wrecked and killed her just a couple months ago. She was only 5 months old, a month younger than my son. It's very embarrassing to share blood with him. Story 66 my mom was once talking to me about one of her friends, then mentioned her friend has a YouTube account where she sings covers. She found it and played one of the videos, then laughed at her friend and joked about how bad her friend is at singing. Story 67 my sis-in-law posted a thing that compared COVID vaccines to the Holocaust on FB, but I'm not even sure if she knows what the Holocaust is. Either way it's sad. Story 68 I have my best friend from childhood. He quickly met a girl right out of high school and knocked her up, and the girl loved to dye her hair pre-pregnancy and did so a couple of times while pregnant. We were in our early 20s and my mom deadass looked at me in my eyes without missing a beat, said, "Well, that baby is going to have ugly hair when it's born." I was shocked but decided to see where this would go. "So mom, why do you think the baby will have ugly hair?" "Oh, because your friend dyes her hair and that will affect the baby's hair color and what it will be." I laughed so hard. "Yeah mom, that's not how it works." "Yes it does." I sighed. "Well, why, you are right that parents do pass things from themselves to their offspring like eye color, height, and yes, hair color. You are dead wrong about how the process works. You see, we get traits like the ones I mentioned from our DNA, not from the outside world. So unless that hair dye will somehow change your DNA and reprogram it to be a different color, which it can't, then the baby will most likely be born with brown hair since both parents have brown hair." About 9 months later, and oh my god, the baby was healthy and born with brown fucking hair. Story 69 my husband and I were in Spencer's at the mall one day, just walking around for exercise, looking at all the silly stuff, and we walked down the adults-only aisle. They had cock rings there that were I think silicone, so very small but stretchy, and he holds one up and says, "Who the could wear this?" A little kid, and I just stared at him with my mouth open in shock, and he suddenly realized just how inappropriate that comment was. mumbled something about no, because they're so small. And then put it down and wandered out of the store. I mean, I didn't divorce him or anything, but I was a bit embarrassed to have been part of that conversation. Story 70 Australian here. At a family dinner my father-in-law interrupted everyone to say raise your hand if you think we've had half of all our rights stripped away from us in this country. Story 71 They said to me I am not vaccinated background I am a nurse. I left my grandma's house on Thanksgiving after they told me. I told my grandma I love them and hope they live. Story 72 I was invited to a party and within 10 minutes of being there, the host ran down the stairs drunk and naked with a furry hanging out of his. A member of my family was unironically talking about COVID giving the government an excuse to turn us into a police state. We don't have the manpower or finances to accomplish that. She thought there would be tanks going up and down the streets. This was after the police force said that they'd barely enforce curfew restrictions.